They say the sky is the fairest place on earth. Everyone pays for a seat, and everyone's equal once the cabin door closes. But that morning, 16-year-old Elias Reed would learn how fragile that promise really was. He wasn't chasing glory or money, or any of those revenge stories people click on for quick satisfaction. All he wanted was to sit in the seat his mother once served from Seat 1A and feel, for a few hours, like the world had finally made peace with her memory. The airport was humming with a kind of organized chaos only early flights create. Rolling suitcases, caffeine breath, and the faint echo of boarding announcements. Elias stood near gate 47, his posture stiff. A crisp boarding pass folded between his fingers like a ticket to something sacred. His father had left before dawn, pressing the ticket into his palm with a quiet, proud smile. "You'll be fine, son. She'd want you to take that seat." He didn't have to say her name, Grace Reed, because it lived everywhere around him. The airline had created a small scholarship in her honor, 7 years after the crash that took her life. Today, Elias was one of 3 students invited to Washington for the Future Flyers Summit. The first-class upgrade had been a surprise, issued by the airline itself, a gesture of gratitude. To Elias, it wasn't luxury. It was pilgrimage. He arrived early, scanning the big silver letters on the gate display. Flight 417, Washington, D.C. The numbers shimmered under the terminal lights. He remembered his mother's handwriting, meticulous cursive on the notes she used to leave by his lunchbox. "Look up when you feel small, Eli. The sky never judges." He smiled faintly. For the first time in years, flying didn't scare him. When the gate agent scanned his pass, the machine beeped. 2 quick tones, one high, one low. The woman frowned at the screen. "First class? Traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am." She tapped a few keys, shrugged, and forced a polite smile. "All right, honey. Have a safe flight." Elias thanked her and stepped through the jet bridge, his heart pounding. The narrow tunnel smelled of aluminum and coffee. He breathed it in like oxygen. Inside the plane, the cabin glowed with soft amber light. Passengers settled into wide leather seats, unfolding newspapers and adjusting earbuds. Elias clutched his ticket, double-checking the number. 1A, front row, window. He placed his backpack under the seat, slid the boarding pass into the pocket, and traced the curve of the armrest. The texture was cool, polished, worn smooth by years of travelers who probably never wondered whose hands had served them. For a moment, he saw his mother in his mind, her navy uniform, the tiny silver wings pinned above her heart. She used to hum softly while setting meal trays, he remembered. "Every seat deserves the same care," she'd say. A shadow fell across him. "Excuse me?" a woman's voice said, low but firm. He looked up. A flight attendant stood before him, mid-40s, perfectly pressed uniform, smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her nameplate read, Marla Briggs. "Are you sure you're in the right seat, sweetheart?" Elias blinked. Yes, ma'am. 1A. He held out his ticket. She took it, scanned it briefly, then looked back at him. "First class is reserved for full-fare passengers or authorized guests. You're traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am. My mom used to work for the airline. I think the upgrade was—" She cut him off. "We've had a lot of mix-ups lately. I'll double-check." Marla disappeared down the aisle, her heels clicking against the carpet. Elias could feel people's eyes on him. A man across the aisle adjusted his glasses. A woman whispered something to her husband. He pulled his hoodie tighter, wishing he could sink into the seat and vanish. When Marla returned, her smile had vanished. "I'm sorry," she said in a tone that wasn't sorry at all. "It looks like this seat isn't available to unaccompanied minors. You'll need to move to the back." Elias froze. "But my boarding pass—" "It happens," she said. "Rules are rules." She reached for his ticket again, but he held it tighter. For the first time, he noticed the faint engraving on the metal plate beneath the armrest. For Grace Reed, who served with dignity. His chest tightened. He swallowed hard. "This was my mother's route," he whispered. "She died working for this airline." For half a second, something flickered in Marla's eyes. Hesitation, maybe shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I understand, but policies are policies," she said flatly. "Please take your things." The aisle went silent. The low hum of the air conditioning felt deafening. Elias stood, clutching his backpack, and stepped into the aisle. The older couple in 2A looked away. No one said a word. Each step toward economy felt heavier than the last, as if the plane itself wanted to push him back. But he didn't cry. He wouldn't give her that. He reached row 27, slid into the window seat, and turned toward the fading light outside. A ground crew worker waved at the cockpit. The engines began to roar. Elias pressed his forehead to the glass. He had dreamed of seeing the world through his mother's window. Now he saw only his reflection, and a question he couldn't shake. How could the sky still feel this small? The jet bridge sighed as passengers filed in, one slow-moving line of strangers sharing the same air. Elias kept his shoulders tight, holding his boarding pass like armor. The hum of engines deepened beneath the floor, vibrating through the soles of his sneakers. Seat 1A. He repeated it like a prayer. He stepped into the first-class cabin and froze. It was nothing like the economy seats he was used to. Everything looked softer, quieter, almost unreal. The lights glowed gold against cream leather, and the faint scent of citrus and fabric softener floated through the air. He slid into his seat, setting his backpack under the armrest. The window beside him shimmered with rain, and beyond it, the runway lights blinked like distant stars. For a few seconds, he felt safe. Then came the stares. Not from everyone, just enough to make him feel like a question mark in a room full of periods. The man in 2A peered over his newspaper. A woman with diamond earrings paused mid-sip of champagne. The silence wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like being pressed against glass. Elias looked down at his hands. He wasn't sure what made them look out of place. His age, his skin, or just the simple fact that he looked like someone who didn't belong here, sitting in a seat that cost more than his father's rent. He straightened the boarding pass on his lap, trying to act casual, like he'd done this before. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind him, professional, practiced. He turned to see Marla Briggs, the same flight attendant who'd checked on passengers during boarding. Up close, her uniform was immaculate. Every fold pressed sharp, every strand of hair tucked perfectly into place. "Are you sure you're in the right seat, sweetheart?" she asked, her tone coated in politeness that didn't quite hide the suspicion underneath. Elias nodded quickly and held up his pass. "Yes, ma'am, 1A. She leaned over, scanned the small screen near the galley, then frowned. "Traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am." Her lips tightened, just a little. "I'll be right back." Elias felt the oxygen shift as she walked away. The man in 2A cleared his throat, the kind of sound people make when they want you to know they disapprove but won't say it out loud. He tried to look out the window again, but his reflection was clearer than the view. Wide eyes, skin glistening under cabin light, trying to appear smaller than he was. His mother used to tell him that silence can be louder than shouting. "When they don't speak, Eli," she'd say, "they make you fill the silence with your own guilt." He could hear her now, somewhere between memory and heartbeat. Marla returned with a forced smile. "All right," she said. "So, here's the thing. That seat isn't actually available to unaccompanied minors. It's policy." Elias blinked. "But I'm 16. "Yes, exactly. You're under 18. For safety reasons, we can't have minors in the emergency rows or first class without a guardian present." He frowned, confused. "This isn't an emergency row." She sighed like someone explaining the obvious. "It's still part of the cabin that requires adult supervision. I'll need you to move to the back." A few heads turned. A businessman in a tailored suit leaned slightly to see what was happening. Elias tried to keep his voice steady. "But the airline gave me this seat. It was—" "Sir," she interrupted sharply, "I don't make the rules. Please, gather your things." Her tone sliced through the air. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Elias stared at the boarding pass again, the little embossed logo at the top glinting in the light. His throat tightened. "My mom used to work for this airline," he said softly. She died working for it." Something flickered across Marla's face. Surprise, maybe discomfort, but it vanished behind her professional smile. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, "but this is procedure. We can't make exceptions." He wanted to argue. He wanted to ask what exactly was unsafe about sitting in a chair, but the words wouldn't come. Every muscle in his body told him that anything he said would only make things worse. So he nodded. Slowly. He stood up, grabbed his backpack, and stepped into the aisle. The carpet felt softer than it should have, the kind of softness that makes you aware of how much you don't belong on it. As he turned, his sleeve brushed against the armrest, and he noticed a small silver plaque beneath it, something he hadn't seen before. The light hit it just right, revealing a line of engraved words, "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." He froze. His pulse thundered in his ears. His mother's name, her exact name. He ran his thumb over the letters, tracing the G like it could bring her back. When he looked up, Marla was already watching him. "Please," she said, more quietly this time. "Take your seat in the back." Elias didn't trust himself to speak. He slipped the boarding pass into his pocket, turned, and walked down the aisle. No one said a word. Not one voice spoke up. He passed row 5, then row 10. The luxury carpet faded into the cheaper texture of the main cabin. Conversations restarted. Earbuds went in. The world kept turning. By the time he reached row 27, his legs felt like stone. He slid into a window seat, pulled his hood over his head, and stared outside. The reflection of the terminal lights blurred with the rain streaks across the glass. He took a deep breath and whispered to no one, "I just wanted to sit where she once stood." Outside, a crewman guided the luggage cart past the wing, waving his orange wands. The engines rumbled again, louder this time. And as the plane began to push back, Elias pressed his palm to the window, right where his reflection stared back. Half boy, half memory, whole heart breaking in silence. The plane door closed with a heavy click that sounded almost final. Elias sat stiff in row 27, staring at the patterned seat in front of him. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. The hum of the engines vibrated through the floor, steady but cold, like the sound of something pretending to be alive. He could still feel the eyes on him, even though no one in economy had seen what happened up front. His chest burned. His throat was tight, like he'd swallowed a stone. He wanted to disappear, but every breath kept reminding him he still existed. From the front cabin, a voice floated through the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." Her voice, Marla's, calm, professional, like nothing had happened. When the plane began to taxi, Elias leaned against the window. The lights outside streaked by in golden blurs. He imagined his mom seeing him right now, sitting there, silent and small, after being told he didn't belong. "Don't shrink for anyone, Eli," she'd say when he was little. "Even quiet people take up space." But he wasn't sure how to do that anymore. Not here. Not with strangers who'd watched him walk down the aisle like a problem being escorted away. The wheels left the ground. Los Angeles dropped beneath them, the ocean glimmering at the edges of dawn. Elias thought about the seat, the metal plaque under the armrest, his mother's name carved into it. He hadn't known the airline had done that. He hadn't known they'd remembered her at all. A wave of guilt hit him hard. He should have fought harder, should have stayed. His mother would have stood her ground, but she'd also taught him something else. Dignity isn't loud. It's how you stand when the world looks away. He pressed his lips together and tried to hold that thought, even as his eyes stung. Marla passed through the cabin, her smile returning as if she could erase what had happened with routine. She handed out snacks and drinks, her tone warm and steady, almost motherly. When she reached Elias's row, their eyes met. "Apple juice or water?" she asked, her voice neutral. He hesitated. "Water, please." She poured it, handed him the cup, and moved on without another word. But Elias noticed her hand shake slightly when she reached for the next tray. He turned the paper cup in his fingers, watching the condensation bead on the surface. It didn't matter. Nothing she did now could change what she'd already done. He'd learned something bigger in that moment. That kindness, when it comes too late, feels like another version of silence. A few rows ahead, an elderly woman turned and looked at him. She had soft gray curls and kind eyes that seemed to know too much. She leaned over the aisle. "Sweetheart," she said quietly, "you okay?" Elias hesitated. He didn't trust his voice. The woman smiled gently. "You don't have to talk. Just know I saw what happened. Some of us notice." He nodded, unable to speak. The knot in his throat finally loosened just a little. 2 hours later, somewhere over the Rockies, the seatbelt sign turned off. People stretched, reclined, whispered. Elias opened the seatback pocket and pulled out the airline's in-flight magazine. His mother used to edit passenger safety articles before she became a senior attendant. Inside, on the second page, he found a headline: "Service with Dignity. Our commitment to every passenger." He stared at the words until they blurred. A strange, bitter laugh escaped him. A single exhale that wasn't quite laughter at all. Up front, Marla stood by the galley phone, her voice low but urgent. "Yes," she whispered. "It's taken care of. He's sitting in the back now." She paused, listening. "No, I don't think anyone recorded it. Just, can you make sure this doesn't reach the supervisor?" She didn't know the call was routed through the cabin safety recording system, a new internal policy that automatically archived staff communications. The system logged every word she said, every excuse she made. Back in row 27, Elias didn't know any of that. He just watched the clouds drift by, endless and white, like a world where no one could fall. He thought about how easily people could take something sacred and turn it into protocol. How rules could be used to justify almost anything. Cruelty, exclusion, even humiliation. He whispered the phrase under his breath, testing how it sounded. Rules are rules. The words tasted hollow. He imagined his mom hearing that. Grace Reed, the woman who once gave up her meal to a crying child in coach. The woman who died making sure every passenger was safe. Would she have smiled at this world of regulations and ranking? Or would she have said what he was too afraid to? That sometimes rules don't keep people safe. They just keep them in their place. The engines droned on. A flight attendant's laughter echoed faintly from the galley. The sound made his stomach twist. He opened his notebook and began to write. Not for an audience, not for revenge, but to remember. He wrote down the time, the seat number, the nameplate. Grace Reed, seat 1A. And the words she used, rules are rules. Each line steadied his breathing. Writing was the only protest he had left. When the captain announced their descent, Elias looked out the window again. The clouds were thinning, the land below coming into view, a patchwork of cities, rivers, and roads. He pressed his hand against the cold glass. Somewhere up front, a seat sat empty, gleaming in the cabin light. His mother's name still rested beneath it. Unseen. He closed his eyes. One day, he thought, I'll sit there again. Not because they let me, but because she earned it. And for the first time that day, his chest stopped burning. Not because the pain was gone, but because he decided to carry it differently. The plane leveled out, engines purring like a distant storm. Cabin lights dimmed to a warm dusk, and the aisle filled with the soft choreography of travel. Seatbelts clicking, pages turning, plastic cups kissing tray tables. Elias stayed very still in row 27, his knees angled in, his backpack hugged close, as if leaving less space would cost him less dignity. He told himself to breathe normally. In out, count to 4, start over. Up front, a curtain swished closed. The sound was small but final, like a door that didn't need a lock. Somewhere behind it, his seat, the seat with his mother's name hidden beneath the armrest, kept shining under better light. He reached for the window shade. lifted it halfway, and let the afternoon sun flatten across the back of his hand. He liked how sunlight didn't ask questions. It just arrived. A cart squeaked up the aisle. A younger flight attendant, different from Marla, stopped beside the row across from him. "Pretzels or cookies?" she asked, bright as if the plane was a birthday party. Laughter bubbled 2 rows ahead. An elbow knocked a cup. Ice chimed in cheap plastic. Life had resumed its regular shape, and he was expected to fit inside it. He pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth to keep from tearing up. Not here. Not like this. "Sweetheart," a voice said gently. Elias turned. The older woman he'd seen in Chapter 2, soft gray curls, soft gray sweater, leaned into the aisle from row 26. Her hands were small but steady, folded like she'd been waiting for a good time to speak. "You don't have to answer me," she said, "but I wanted you to know. I saw what happened." He held her gaze for a second and then nodded. It felt like placing a stone somewhere safe. She gave him a smile that was mostly eyes. "My name's Hannah." "Elias," he heard himself say, the sound of his name surprising him. It sounded intact. "If you need anything," she said, "I'm right here." He swallowed. "Thank you." Hannah didn't push. She turned back to her seat, but every few minutes she tilted her head just enough to let him know she was still there. Her presence worked like a hand on a railing. You didn't have to grab it, but it kept you from falling. A few rows behind, a man in a navy ball cap slid his phone into airplane mode and studied the cabin with the quiet attentiveness of someone who notices exits wherever he goes. He glanced at Elias, then at the call buttons, then at the curtain to first. His cap's brim shadowed his face, but the posture gave him away. Back straight, eyes level, the kind of calm built from years of checklist living. Row 32, aisle. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He was building a map. Elias unzipped his backpack and pulled out a simple spiral notebook, the cheap kind from the school supply aisle. He clicked a pen and wrote the time from the overhead screen. Then he wrote what he remembered exactly as he remembered it. Seat 1A. Engraving, "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." Flight attendant name, Marla Briggs. Words she used, "Rules are rules." He paused, listening to the engines. He added a line. "Silence can be a rule too." The letters calmed him. Words had edges. They stacked. They didn't talk over you. The intercom chimed. A smooth male voice, the captain, mentioned tailwinds and an early arrival. Applause fluttered, died. The cart reached his row. "Snack for you?" the younger attendant asked. "Water's fine," he said. He didn't look up until she set it down. When he did, her smile faltered like she'd remembered him from somewhere and wasn't sure where to place the memory. He nodded thanks. She nodded back, grateful for a way to be kind that didn't require courage. Hannah lifted her own cup toward him, the smallest toast in the world. Elias mirrored it. They drank. The ice clinked. He tried again to picture his mother the way she used to be on planes, efficient, warm, a storm of competence with a soft center. He remembered her bending down to a kid once, tucking a blanket around his legs, whispering, "You're safe now." The memory was so clear he almost turned to see if she was standing in the aisle with her silver wings and that pencil stuck behind one ear. He blinked the vision away and looked forward. The curtain breathed with the plane's motion. "Rules are rules," repeated in his head until the words lost meaning and became sound. Rules. Rules. An engine of their own. His phone, in airplane mode, showed a photo on the lock screen he hadn't changed in years. His mother in uniform, cheek pressed to his forehead when he was 5. A smear of syrup on his chin. Her eyes laughing at the future. He traced the curve of her jaw on the glass, and the gesture steadied him. From row 32, the man in the cap, Lewis, watched quietly as Marla stepped into the economy cabin, made a quick scan, then ducked into the galley phone cradle. Her voice dropped low. The words were swallowed by engine noise, but the posture carried. The way someone stands when they want a problem to stay smaller than it is. Lewis glanced at the small status light above the handset, REC, and his jaw moved once in thought, like a tiny nod to no one. Elias didn't notice any of that. He noticed the seatback magazine, Service with Dignity. He opened to the article and found a pull quote in bold. "Dignity is not an upgrade, it's a promise." The sentence punched a breath from his lungs. He folded the corner, shut the magazine, and set it aside like something that could burn him. "Do you write?" Hannah asked softly, as if she'd been reading over his shoulder without reading at all. "A little," he said. "Keep doing that," she said. "People can ignore your voice. It's harder to ignore evidence." He looked at his notebook again. Evidence. Not revenge, not a scene, not a shouting match that would get him labeled difficult. Just evidence. A small, sturdy word. He could carry that. Outside, the edges of a river cut silver through dark farmland. The sun shifted, and light spilled across the cabin like a tide. He let it move over his face and didn't flinch. The younger attendant returned, collecting trash. "Anything else?" she asked. "I'm okay. Thank you," he said, and meant it. She hesitated. "If you need to speak to anyone, just press the button. I can—" Her eyes flicked toward the galley. "I can get someone." "I will," he said. "Thanks." When she left, Hannah looked back again, just once. "You're doing fine," she said. "Sometimes walking with your head up is louder than yelling." He managed a smile that didn't feel borrowed. The plane began its slow descent. Elias tightened his seatbelt. The engine softened to a hum so low it felt like a heartbeat. He pictured the aisle he'd walked earlier, the way eyes had slid off him like water. It had felt like a walk of shame then. It didn't now. Not entirely. He put the notebook away, straightened his shoulders, faced forward. In the galley, Marla hung up the phone and smoothed her uniform with both palms, as if erasing fingerprints no one had left. She didn't see the rec light blink to save the file. Row 32 did. Lewis leaned back, closed his eyes, and filed the moment in a place where important things wait. Elias watched the clouds break into patches of bright land, highways threading like veins. He wasn't smaller than this plane. He wasn't a mistake it needed to correct. He was a passenger with a boarding pass and a memory worth protecting. He kept his head up. Quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Of names, of facts, of someone watching, of a promise carved in metal under a seat that still existed whether he sat there or not. The wheels met the runway with a firm, honest thud. Somewhere up front, a curtain shivered. Elias didn't. The seatbelt sign pinged off with a soft chime, and the cabin loosened like a muscle. Conversations restarted. Lids popped off plastic cups. A baby let out one brave syllable and then thought better of it. From row 27, Elias watched sunlight slide across the aisle and disappear beneath the curtain to first class, the way light always finds the most expensive surfaces first. Up front, Marla Briggs stood perfectly still, hands folded at her waist. Her smile hadn't returned since takeoff. She took one long inhale that lifted her shoulders a precise inch, then turned for the galley phone, the beige, institutional kind that looked incapable of doing harm. The handset came up with a soft click. "Operations," she said, keeping her voice low. "This is Briggs on 417. No greeting, no pleasantries. It sounded like someone reporting the weather. There was a pause, the small hiss of an open line. She glanced over her shoulder, checking the aisle. The curtain to first rippled once and fell still. Satisfied, she faced the metal panel above the phone, a tidy grid of labels and lights. In the upper corner, a red dot glowed. REC. She didn't look at it. She'd seen it so many times, it was wallpaper. The airline had installed the cabin ethics recording system last year. New policy, new training, new acronyms everyone pretended to memorize. For safety and quality assurance, the email had said, which meant it recorded more than safety and caught more than quality. "Go ahead, 417, a male voice answered, bored and caffeine flat. "We had a seat assignment issue in first," she said. "Minor, resolved." "Specifics?" She kept her tone even. "Passenger placed in an ineligible seat. Unaccompanied minor. Moved to economy without incident." There was another pause, shorter this time. Somewhere on the other end of the line, someone typed. She imagined a keyboard, a cubicle, a stack of policies printed in cheery corporate blue. "Ineligible how?" he asked. "Policy restriction," she said. "We've had confusion lately. I just want to make sure this doesn't escalate. If you get any inquiries, this was a routine correction." She softened the word correction as if words could be sanded on contact. The voice on the line cleared his throat. "Name of the passenger?" She hesitated, a fraction of a second, but the system didn't miss fractions. "Elias Reed," she said. 16. The upgrade looked promotional. Didn't meet criteria. Silence. Then, "Copy. Any witnesses? Any video?" "Not that I saw," she said quickly. "I handled it discreetly." Directly above the handset, the red dot pulsed once, then steadied, logging the word handled beside minor, beside promotional, a constellation of corporate comfort. Marla drew a tiny breath and lowered her voice further, leaning into the shield of the galley. "Listen," she added, switching from report to suggestion. "We've had social posts lately about perceptions. If anything comes in about this flight, I'd prefer it be routed to comms first, not to my supervisor." She smiled at no one. "You know how noise becomes policy." On the other end, the man made a non-committal sound. She filled the space. She was practiced at that. "There's also the memorial program," she continued, as if she were listing inventory. "Sometimes they put names on things that confuse passengers about entitlements. It's sensitive. I'm just trying to keep it clean." A beat. 2. "Memorial program?" the man repeated. "Nothing," she said too fast. "Just flagging the risk." The red dot didn't blink. It simply remembered. In row 32, the man in the Navy cap, Lewis, had angled his body just enough to see the galley without being obvious. Years in uniform had taught him the art of not being seen while watching everything. He wasn't reading lips, but posture carries meaning. The way a shoulder tightens for certain words, the way a head tilts when someone edits a sentence mid-syllable. He noted the handset, the panel, the light. The industry had changed while he was sleeping. Phones that kept secrets used to be the rule. Now the phones kept receipts. He sat back and opened the airline app, thumb hovering over report an incident. Not yet, he told himself. Facts first. Sturdy, stackable facts. Marla's voice softened into reassurance, the kind adults use on skittish horses and untrained policies. "We want to support the brand promise," she said. "First class can't be a free-for-all. I'm sure you understand." She didn't add the rest out loud, that some passengers fit the promise better than others, that some orderings of the cabin made more visual sense, and that sense could be mistaken for safety if you said it cleanly enough. "Understood," the man on the line said, his boredom wearing a thin new edge. "Noted." "I appreciate it," she replied, and let a hint of relief color the word appreciate, a nudge toward complicity. "I'll make sure there's no disruption." She hung up gently, like placing a sleeping child in a crib. Above the cradle, REC dimmed and then brightened again as the system time-stamped her last sentence, appended it to a file, and sent a copy to an inbox with a name she didn't recognize because she'd never needed to. She turned, smoothed her uniform with both palms, and put the smile back on her face the way people put furniture back after moving it for a party. In row 27, Elias didn't know about the light, the file, or the inbox. He only knew the taste of recycled air and the way humiliation hangs in a throat long after the moment ends. He had his notebook open again, not writing this time, just breathing with it on his lap like a small animal you didn't want to startle. The page with his mother's name, for Grace Reed, who served with dignity, was a memory now, not an inscription. He tried to hold both, Want a ginger ale? Hannah asked, turning just enough to share the offer and not the pity. He shook his head. I'm okay. You don't have to be, she said, and left it there. He nodded. The permission helped. Marla stepped out of the galley with a tray. She moved like a diagram, angles and arrows, serving row 6, then row 9, before pivoting back toward the curtain. She didn't look at row 27. If she had, she would have seen a kid trying to exist at a smaller volume without disappearing entirely. As she reached for the curtain, the younger attendant brushed past her, whispering, "We're getting DC media on this flight's tail number a lot lately. Some alert on the gate app." It wasn't a report. It was a worry put into words so it would weigh less. Marla's jaw clicked once. "Noise," she said. "It dies if we keep moving." She swept the curtain aside as if motion could be a shield. In row 32, Lewis finally tapped Report an Incident. The form opened with quiet inevitability. Flight 417, time approx 10:42, location first class / forward galley, summary. Removal of minor from assigned seat. Possible misapplication of policy. Details. Witnessed attendant phone call after action. Note: cabin ethics recording indicator active. He didn't add adjectives. Adjectives start arguments. Nouns end them. He hit submit. The screen flashed thank you in corporate blue, the kind designed to be impossible to mistrust. The plane nudged eastward into thinner clouds. Far below, the Potomac curled like a bright thread. A city waited, full of rooms built for hearings and statements and apologies drafted by teams. In the present tense, on a beige handset, a red dot had blinked. Somewhere unseen, a file had been born. And in row 27, a boy kept breathing in and out, learning how silence could be held without letting it hollow you out. He didn't know the system had already heard on his behalf. He only knew he wasn't alone. Not completely. Not anymore. The engines hummed in steady rhythm, somewhere between lullaby and threat. Most passengers had drifted into the blank stare of mid-flight, earbuds in, screens glowing. The plane floated inside its own little world of ordinary calm, as if humiliation and conscience couldn't fit through the cabin doors. But row 32 IL stayed alert. Lewis Grant, retired air marshal, ex-flight operations inspector, watched patterns instead of movies. He saw how people's shoulders told stories, how quiet could hide meaning. He noticed the boy in row 27 who hadn't moved much since takeoff. Hood up, pen tapping the corner of a notebook, the kind of stillness that isn't rest. Lewis had seen that posture before, too many times. The look of someone trying to shrink without disappearing. He glanced forward. The galley curtain rippled, then settled again. The senior flight attendant, Marla, her badge read, had just ended a long, hushed phone call. Her smile, when she re-emerged, was wrong. Too controlled, like it had been ironed on. The captain's voice came through the speakers, smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're cruising at 34,000 feet. Clear weather ahead. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." The usual applause of sighs followed. Lewis took a sip of lukewarm coffee, then reached for his tablet. He opened the airline's passenger feedback portal, not because he was angry, but because he believed in paper trails. Paper trails make people listen. The form blinked onto the screen. Report, incident, feedback, discrimination, concern. He didn't type yet. He watched. From his vantage point, he could see part of row 27, just the back of the boy's hoodie and a flash of a notebook page. The kid was writing in short bursts, then staring out the window as if calibrating his next sentence. That was how truth usually entered the world. Quietly, through people who weren't trying to win, only to remember. Lewis smiled faintly. Good, he thought. He's documenting. In the galley, Marla was whispering to the younger attendant again. Their tones had changed, less about coffee service, more about control. Words like policy, optics, and supervisor floated past. The younger woman's face was tight. She nodded too often. Lewis took another note, small and neat. Tone of guilt begins around 10:45 a.m. Galley recording indicator on. Possible internal ethics line active. He didn't work for the airline anymore, but habits were muscle memory. He believed in evidence the way some people believed in prayer. He didn't have to save the world. He just had to make sure someone couldn't erase what really happened. Down the aisle, Hannah, the older woman from row 26, leaned back far enough to whisper to Elias. "You write fast," she said with a kind smile. Elias glanced up, startled. "It's easier than talking." She nodded knowingly. "Good. Words leave footprints, even quiet ones." He almost smiled, but the attempt collapsed halfway. "Do you think she—" He stopped, searching for the right word. "Hates people like me?" Hannah shook her head slowly. "No, she doesn't think at all. That's the problem." Elias exhaled a small laugh that wasn't really laughter. "That's worse, isn't it?" "It's fixable," she said, voice calm. "Thinking can be taught." She handed him a napkin. "For your notes." Lewis kept watching over the top of his tablet. Not intruding, just witnessing. When Marla passed through economy to check overhead bins, her eyes skimmed over Elias without stopping. She smiled at row 25, complimented a passenger's scarf, then paused near the window 3 rows ahead. "Everyone comfortable back here?" she asked, her tone sweetened by performance. No one answered. The silence was polite, but pointed. Hannah pretended to adjust her blanket. Lewis caught her eye. She gave the smallest shake of her head, just enough to confirm what he already knew. Marla's gaze brushed past Elias, flickered once, then left. She moved on, her perfume trailing behind like a signature. Lewis began typing. Possible discriminatory removal of minor passenger from first class. Staff member, Marla Briggs. Evidence. Phone call recorded under cabin ethics system. Witness. Multiple. He paused, looking for the right phrasing. He'd spent years writing field reports that could get people fired or cleared. Words mattered. They could punish. They could also protect. He retyped part of it. Recommend internal review. Not punitive, but corrective. Passenger displayed no aggression. Staff tone indicates bias or assumption based on age/appearance. That was better, precise, honest. It let the system choose what kind of justice it wanted to be. Elias closed his notebook and stared at his reflection in the window. Clouds rolled past, a white sea without judgment. "I'm not mad," he whispered, half to himself. "I just wish she'd seen me." Hannah heard it. "She will," she said softly. "Sooner than she thinks." Elias looked confused, but Hannah just smiled, eyes on the aisle. Sometimes the sky has better memory than people. The intercom crackled again. "Cabin crew, please prepare for descent." Lewis glanced at the time. 10:58. He pressed submit on the report. A blue confirmation blinked across his screen. "Thank you for helping us improve passenger dignity." He almost laughed at the irony of the tagline. But somewhere deep down, he wanted to believe it. Maybe the company meant it once. Maybe it could mean it again. He turned off his tablet, folded his hands, and watched the clouds break open to reveal the city below. The plane began to dip, the hum shifting to a long, smooth sigh. Elias tightened his belt and wiped his palms on his jeans. The same hand that had written so much now trembled slightly. He closed the notebook and whispered, "For you, Mom," under his breath. No one heard, but Lewis saw his lips move, and that was enough. Up front, Marla adjusted her scarf and picked up the galley phone again, unaware that her earlier call had been saved, time-stamped, and forwarded to corporate ethics review by an automated process she'd forgotten existed. The system didn't feel guilt. It didn't sleep. It just recorded. And while she smiled to herself, satisfied that she'd handled the situation, small forces were already in motion, silent, factual, impossible to argue with. As the plane banked toward Washington, sunlight flooded through the right side windows, touching Elias's face like something deliberate. For the first time since boarding, he didn't flinch from it. Lewis glanced toward him one last time and nodded, barely noticeable. A quiet recognition between witnesses. No medals, no speeches. Just acknowledgement. The kind that builds slow revolutions. The plane touched down with a heavy thud that rippled through the cabin. Tires screamed, flaps roared, and the quiet world inside shook itself awake. Passengers exhaled in relief, the kind of communal sigh that means we made it. Elias didn't feel relief. He felt suspended, as if the wheels had landed, but his chest hadn't. From the window of row 27, he could see ground crews scurrying under a sun already too bright. Washington was waking up. The jetway arms waited like open jaws. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain said over the intercom, "welcome to Washington, D.C. Local time is 11:23. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is off." The same polite sentence echoed across hundreds of flights each day. But today, somewhere between the tone and the truth, something inside that voice cracked open. Up front, Marla performed the routine perfectly. Shoulders squared, smile back in place, movements rehearsed by years of service and certainty. She made the final announcement, thanked everyone for flying Ariane Air, and promised a seamless journey onward. Then she reached for her phone again. The light above the handset blinked red. She didn't see row 32, where Lewis sat, hands resting calmly on his knees. He had already submitted his report before descent, but old instincts told him not to leave just yet. He stayed seated as the first passengers unbuckled and reached for their bags, as overhead bins popped open like synchronized wings. His gaze followed Marla, patient and steady. Elias didn't move. He wanted to, but his body was heavy, not from fear anymore, just from something larger. Shame mixed with exhaustion, and exhaustion mixed with disbelief. "Go ahead, sweetheart," said Hannah, the older woman beside him. "You can get up now." He shook his head slowly. "I'll wait." "You sure?" "Yeah," he said. "People always rush to leave. I think I'll stay a second." She smiled faintly. "You take your time." Outside, phones started chiming to life. Pings, notifications, the artificial birdsong of arrival. The cabin filled with voices again, louder now. Someone a few rows up muttered, "Did you see that video?" Elias froze. The whisper spread fast, faster than the bags rolling down the aisle. "I just saw it. Some flight attendant kicked a kid out of first class." "Was that this flight?" "Wait, is that the same boy?" The words hit Elias like invisible taps on the shoulder. He turned slightly, saw a man holding up his phone, the screen glowing. He didn't have to look long. He recognized the reflection. His hoodie, his backpack, the walk down the aisle. Someone had filmed everything. The video had found the world before he had found the courage to speak. By the time they opened the cabin door, the Wi-Fi had done its job. On Twitter, the post had hit 2 million views in the first hour. The caption read, "Black teen kicked out of first class, told, 'Rules are rules.' Seat was a memorial to his mother, a former flight attendant. Seat 1A had grace. Read, dignity in the sky." Phones buzzed across the plane. Passengers scrolled, their faces changing. Confusion, guilt, recognition. Hannah looked down at her screen, then back at Elias. "You're trending, sweetheart," she whispered. He blinked. "What?" People saw it, the whole world seeing it. Up front, Marla's smile faltered. She felt the buzz in her own pocket, pulled out her phone, and froze. The thumbnail of the video sat on her notifications like a mirror she couldn't turn away from. Her face was in the corner of the frame. Clear. She locked the phone and tucked it away, eyes darting toward the door where a gate agent waited. "Marla," the agent said softly, "they want you to check in with corporate before your next assignment." She nodded too quickly. "Of course." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she folded her scarf back into place. Passengers began to disembark. Hannah gestured for Elias to go first. "Come on," she said. "Head high." He rose slowly, clutching his backpack, notebook tucked safely inside. Every step toward the door felt unreal, like walking into a version of the world that was watching this time. The air outside the jet bridge was colder, sharper. He didn't realize until then how stale the air inside had been. At the terminal, screens glowed with news alerts. The same thumbnail everywhere. His image walking down the aisle, the caption bold beneath it. Flight 417, incident raises questions about racial bias in airline policy. Lewis exited a few passengers behind. He didn't approach the boy, didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. His role had been quiet, like all good witnesses. Instead, he stepped aside near a charging station and pulled out his phone. An internal message blinked across the airline's staff app. Urgent. HQ meeting scheduled. Passenger dignity incident. Flight 417. He smiled, not because it was over, but because it had started. By the time Elias reached baggage claim, journalists were already gathering at the exit. Cameras flashed, microphones angled, questions sharp as rain. He flinched but kept walking. He wasn't a headline. He was a kid who had wanted to sit where his mother once worked, that's all. A woman from corporate approached, calm and precise. "Mr. Reed?" she asked. "The airline would like to speak with you privately." Hannah stepped in, protective. "He's still a minor. You can wait." The woman hesitated. "Of course." Hannah looked at Elias. "Let's get your things first." Somewhere, in a conference room 5 floors above the arrivals hall, an executive replayed the video on a large screen. The sound of Marla's voice filled the space. "Rules are rules." He pressed pause. The frozen frame caught Elias mid-turn. Face unreadable. Dignity intact. Someone whispered, "This will hit stock." Someone else said, "This will hit conscience." The silence that followed was the sound of system shifting. Gears of accountability, long rusted, beginning to move. Down below, Elias and Hannah stepped onto the moving walkway toward the exit. The airport noise rose around them. Announcements, laughter, the low hum of thousands of stories colliding in one place. Hannah leaned in. "You didn't need to yell," she said. "You just needed to stand." He nodded, clutching his backpack tighter. "I didn't do anything." "I know," she said. "That's what makes it powerful." As they stepped off the walkway, a patch of sunlight from the glass ceiling landed square on his shoulders, and he let it stay there. He didn't hide from it this time. By the next morning, the story had crossed oceans. Seat 1A was trending in 32 countries. News anchors called it the Dignity Flight, and the airline's PR inbox, normally filled with upgrade requests and delayed luggage complaints, was drowning in rage. At Arion Air headquarters, downtown Washington, D.C., blinds were drawn and voices were sharp. The executive board sat around a glossy table, their reflections jittering in the coffee-dark surface. A projector hummed. On the screen, the paused frame of the viral video showed Elias mid-step in the aisle, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. "He never raised his voice," said the director of operations, her tone uneasy. "He didn't even argue." "Exactly," replied the head of communications. "He didn't have to. The internet's arguing for him." The CEO, Martin Hale, rubbed his temple. "We'll issue an apology." "Apology won't work," another executive interrupted. "There's more coming." Martin looked up. "More what?" "The recording," she said. "From the cabin ethics system." The room went silent. Someone's pen rolled off the table, clattering against tile. At 8:47 a.m., the internal audio file, automatically stored by the aircraft's compliance system, was sent to the ethics board for routine review. Only this time, the board didn't know what they were walking into. The file was short. 2 minutes. But it didn't need to be longer. Voice identified. Marla Briggs. Flight 417. Segment: In-flight call to operations. The playback began. Passenger placed in an ineligible seat. Unaccompanied minor. Moved to economy without incident. Name of the passenger? Elias Reed, 16. The upgrade looked promotional. Didn't meet criteria. Understood. We've had issues with perception lately. I'd prefer this not reach my supervisor. A long pause. Then the words that froze the room. Sometimes these kids think sympathy equals entitlement. I'm just maintaining standards. The recording clicked off. No one breathed. Then, slowly, one of the board members, an older man who'd started at the airline as a flight attendant, leaned forward. "Grace Reed," he murmured. "That name's familiar." The compliance officer pulled up the passenger record. "Mother deceased, Grace Reed, former senior crew member, died on duty 7 years ago. Her memorial plaque is installed under seat 1A. The silence cracked like glass. By 10 a.m., the CEO had ordered a closed meeting with the ethics board, legal, and communications. "We can't bury this," the legal counsel said bluntly. "The file's already been flagged in our internal archive. Once audit requests it, it's public record." Martin leaned back in his chair. "Then we don't bury it," he said. "We own it." Someone scoffed. "You mean admit fault?" "I mean tell the truth," he said, eyes on the frozen still of the recording's transcript projected on the wall. "We tell people what happened, and we show them what we're doing about it." It was the kind of sentence that made half the room nervous and the other half hopeful. Across the city, Elias sat in a small office at a local advocacy center. Hannah had insisted he come somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't smell like jet fuel or camera flashes. He sat across from a lawyer who spoke softly and carried tissues like she'd been through this before. "Elias, the airline's reaching out," she said. "They've admitted they have the audio file from the call." He looked up. "The one she made?" "Yes, it confirms what happened." He nodded slowly, eyes on his notebook resting in his lap. "I don't want to sue them," he said. "That's not what this is." "No one's talking lawsuits yet," she said gently. "They want to meet, officially." Hannah, seated beside him, smiled faintly. "You see? Quiet doesn't mean invisible." He smiled back, unsure. "It still feels like noise." "Let them make the noise," she said. "You just stay true." At Air headquarters, a conference room transformed into a war room. Laptops glowed, papers stacked, statements drafted. The PR lead read aloud the new company message. Air acknowledges a failure in applying its own standards of dignity. The event on Flight 417 revealed an urgent need to align our internal conduct with our public promise. We are launching an immediate review of all crew training and accountability systems. Martin added quietly, "Include her name." Everyone looked up. "Grace Reed," he said. "Don't hide her name. She worked for this airline longer than I have. If we're learning from this, we say who taught us." The PR lead hesitated. "That's risky." "It's right," Martin said. "And right lasts longer than risk." By noon, the recording had leaked. Not by a journalist, not by a hacker, but by an employee who believed people deserved to hear the truth. It hit the internet like a pulse. The words "sympathy equals entitlement" became the line everyone quoted. For the public, that sentence wasn't policy. It was poison. News outlets began replaying the audio alongside clips of Elias's quiet walk down the aisle. The contrast was brutal. On social media, one comment rose above the noise. His mother served with dignity. He was denied it. Maybe now the system will finally learn the word. At 3:30 p.m., the ethics board released a statement confirming the authenticity of the recording and announcing a full internal audit. Marla Briggs was suspended pending investigation. In the comment section of the official post, under hundreds of angry messages, one reply stood out. Short, calm, anonymous. "Thank you for remembering her name." No one knew it was Lewis. That evening, the city lights blinked awake outside the hotel window where Elias stayed with Hannah. The television glowed faint blue across the room. On the screen, a news anchor read the headline, "Air opens dignity hearing. CEO Martin Hale to speak tomorrow." Elias stood by the window, notebook in hand. He didn't feel vindicated, just still. The noise outside was for others. Inside him, something quieter had begun to move. He wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. "Mom, They finally heard you. He closed the notebook. The engines that had once roared over his silence were now carrying his mother's name farther than any plane she'd ever flown. The conference center didn't look like a place where people told the truth. It looked like a place where people tried not to. Beige carpet, chrome chairs, a row of flags arranged to suggest order. Cameras stacked along the back wall like extra eyes. Elias stood just inside the doors, backpack on, notebook under his arm. Hannah squeezed his shoulder once and found them 2 seats near the aisle. "Head up," she whispered, like a blessing. At the front, name placards lined a long table. Ethics board, legal, training, comms. In the middle sat CEO Martin Hale, hands folded, posture uncomplicated. A single mic waited before him, the small red ring unlit. On a side table, a speakerphone glowed, connected to a secure line for the cabin ethics recording. Beneath the table skirt, a wire ran like a vein. The room filled in blocks. Pressed to the back, staff along the sides, employees with lanyards in careful clusters. Then a ripple moved through the front row. Marla Briggs took her seat beside corporate counsel, eyes fixed on a point just above the cameras, as if staring at a better version of the story. A gavel tapped politely. The red ring on the CEO's mic blinked on. "Thank you for being here," Martin said. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't perform authority. He just spoke like a person who had chosen to sit at a table. This hearing is about what happened on Flight 417 and what it revealed. About our policies, our training, and our promise. He looked toward the row where Hannah and Elias sat, but he didn't hold the gaze. He wasn't drafting a moment for the evening news. He was locating the reason they were all in the room. "We'll start with the recording," he said. The speakerphone clicked. The 2-minute file played, flat, undeniable. The words hung in the air like smoke that didn't dissipate. "Sometimes these kids think sympathy equals entitlement. I'm just maintaining standards." A camera shutter snapped. No one coughed. The room felt smaller than it had a minute before. Martin let the silence breathe. "That was one of our people," he said evenly. "That was a failure. In judgment, in training, and in the enforcement of policy. Not a public relations problem. A moral one." He didn't look at legal when he said it. An ethics board member adjusted her glasses. "We'll enter the audio and transcript into the record," she said. Her voice wobbled, but only once. Hannah leaned toward Elias. "Evidence," she whispered. "Footprints." A staffer placed a small plaque on the table, brushed metal, black letters. "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." Murmurs rolled across the room like wind across grass. Someone on the press line swallowed too close to their mic. Martin nodded toward the plaque. "This was installed under Seat 1A on select aircraft, part of a memorial program honoring crew members who died on duty," he said. "On Flight 417, we didn't just fail a passenger. We failed one of our own." He didn't say mother. He didn't have to. He turned a page in his notes. "Here is what we're doing." Phones lifted. Typing accelerated. "Effective immediately, we are instituting the Reed Charter, a dignity protocol that governs seat enforcement, customer interaction, and in-flight escalation. It includes 3 actions. 1. We're suspending any discretionary appearance-based enforcement. If it's not in the manual, you can't invent it in the aisle. 2. We're launching mandatory training, dignity in action, for all 6,200 customer-facing staff. Not modules with quizzes you can guess through. Workshops with coaches who will stop you mid-sentence and ask, "What did you just assume?" 3. We're establishing an independent passenger dignity review panel with public reporting. No more quiet filing cabinets. He raised his eyes from the paper. "We will also be speaking the name we've too often put in small print, Grace Reed. Her service will no longer live under an armrest. It will live in how we treat people at 34,000 feet. At the far end of the table, Combs shifted in his chair, prepared to interject with controlled language. Martin didn't yield the mic. "We have requested a meeting with the Reed family," he said. He looked back to the gallery, voice softer. "We'll do it on their terms." The moderator tilted his mic. "We'll take questions." A reporter stood. "Is Ms. Briggs being fired?" Corporate counsel gripped his pen. "Ms. Briggs has been suspended pending investigation." The reporter kept his eyes on Martin. "Do you agree with that decision?" Martin didn't blink. "I agree with due process," he said. "And I agree with consequences." Another hand shot up. "Are you apologizing to the passenger?" "We are not apologizing if anyone felt offended," Martin said, using the air quotes like a tool he did not enjoy. "We are apologizing for what we did. To a 16-year-old who was where we told him he could be." A quiet current ran through the room. Relief, disbelief, respect. It was hard to tell which, in what proportion. But no one missed the fact that he'd used the word we. Hannah nodded, the corners of her eyes bright. Elias stared down at his notebook as if the words needed someplace to land. The moderator glanced toward the gallery. "If the passenger would like to make a statement, he may." Heads turned. The air thinned. Hannah looked at Elias. "You don't have to," she said. He stood anyway. Not fast, not dramatic. He slipped the notebook from under his arm and walked the few steps to the small floor mic. His backpack strap creaked like a whisper. The red ring flickered alive. "My name is Elias Reed," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but the room bent toward it. "I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came because I wanted to sit in a seat my mom once served from." He glanced at the plaque on the table, then back at the board. "I don't need a speech," he said. "I just need you to mean the words on your magazine." He swallowed. "Dignity is not an upgrade. It's a promise." No one moved. The sentence sat perfectly where it belonged, in a room built for promises. He stepped back, turned, and returned to his seat. Hannah took his hand. He let her. The moderator cleared his throat, voice thin. "Thank you." A final question came from the press row. "Mr. Hale, are you worried about the stock?" Martin exhaled through his nose, the ghost of a laugh, but not at the question. "Today I'm worried about keeping our word," he said. "Stocks follow stories. We're deciding what story we are." He looked out once more at the room, as if memorizing the faces that had witnessed this exact arrangement of facts, and lifted the gavel. "This session is adjourned," he said. The red ring died. The cameras stayed on. People stood. Chairs scraped. A dozen staffers swarmed the front like a weather system. The plaque remained, catching a narrow blade of light that had found its way through the blinds. Hannah and Elias stayed seated until the row cleared. When they finally stood, the aisle opened easily before them. No stairs, no hush, just space. On the way out, they passed a monitor streaming the hearing on delay. The chyron read, "Airy on air. Dignity is a promise." Reed Charter announced Elias didn't slow. He didn't need to watch himself. He had been there. And for the first time since Gate 47, the world had met him in the same place. 3 weeks after the hearing, the air inside every Arion Air terminal felt different. Not louder, not busier, just watchful. Screens that once looped destination ads now carried a short message on rotation. Dignity is not an upgrade, it's a promise. The Reed Charter, 2025. Passengers paused to read it. Some smiled faintly. Some simply nodded, as if recognizing something they'd always wanted an airline to say out loud. At Gate 47, Washington, D.C., a crowd had gathered. Not reporters this time, not executives in suits. Families, former crew members, staff in fresh uniforms with silver pins newly engraved with 2 words, Grace Seats. The rededication ceremony wasn't grand. No speeches scripted for applause, just rows of simple chairs, the smell of jet fuel drifting through the glass, and the low hum of departing flights. Elias stood at the back beside Hannah, holding the same notebook that had followed him through every chapter of this strange, unstoppable story. He hadn't written in it for days. Maybe because there wasn't much left to say. A representative from the ethics board stepped up to the mic, voice shaking slightly. "We'd like to welcome you all," she began. "Today, we complete something that should have begun long ago. Across every Air aircraft, the first-class seats will now carry the name Grace Seats, in honor of those who served passengers with dignity and compassion. Her words hung in the air, quiet but resonant. Beside the gate window stood one of the new chairs, sleek cream leather. Beneath the armrest, a brushed silver plaque read, "For Grace Reed, who served with dignity." And below that, smaller text, "In memory of all who made the skies kinder." Elias's throat tightened. It wasn't pride he felt. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was something deeper, the fragile peace that comes from seeing the world bend, just slightly, toward what's right. Reporters took photos from a respectful distance. The CEO, Martin Hale, approached the microphone only after the crowd quieted again. "When I started flying," he said, "we used to tell passengers to sit back and relax. We assumed comfort was enough, but dignity takes work. It takes listening. It takes remembering who taught us to care in the first place." He glanced toward Elias, then toward the seat beside the plaque. "Today, we remember Grace Reed, and we acknowledge her son, Elias, for reminding us what her legacy truly means." A ripple of gentle applause spread through the terminal. No whistles, no flashbulbs. Just a wave of human hands agreeing that something had been repaired. Afterward, people began taking photos of the plaque. A few airline employees touched it lightly before walking away, as though they were promising to carry it forward. Marla Briggs wasn't there. She'd issued her own apology in a letter that went public 2 days earlier. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. "I saw a seat and forgot to see a person. I can't undo that, but I can start over." Elias had read it once, folded it neatly, and tucked it inside his notebook. Not as forgiveness, just as record. When the crowd thinned, Martin approached him. "You doing okay?" he asked. Elias shrugged. "Still getting used to people knowing my name." Martin smiled. "They'll forget soon enough, but they'll remember the rule that came from it." He pointed to the words on the digital display looping above the gate. "Dignity is not an upgrade." "That line was yours," he said. "You said it first." Elias looked down at his sneakers, embarrassed. "I just said what my mom used to tell me." "Then maybe she should have run this company," Martin said, half a laugh in his voice. "She probably would have done a better job." They shook hands, an old-fashioned gesture, quiet and unremarkable, but heavy with meaning. Later, after most of the staff had gone, Hannah and Elias lingered by the gate window. A plane rolled down the runway, its body painted with a new decal, the Grace Fleet. Hannah sighed softly. "Look at that," she said. "Your mom's name on the wings of half the world." He didn't answer right away. He watched the plane rise, its shadow shrinking across the tarmac until it disappeared into the light. "She wouldn't want them to make her a saint," he said finally. "She'd just want them to treat people right." "Seems like they're trying," Hannah said. "Yeah." He smiled faintly. "Maybe the system can learn after all." He opened his notebook one last time, flipped to the first page, where he'd written the words, "Seat 1A. Grace Reed. Rules are rules." He drew a single line through the last phrase and replaced it with, "Grace Seats. Dignity rules." He laughed quietly at how corny it sounded, but Hannah only smiled. "That's how movements start," she said. "With something that sounds too simple to be important." They walked toward the boarding doors. Security waved them through without fuss, just another pair of travelers. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, Elias glanced down the corridor of light and shadow. The hum of engines filled the air, a sound that used to hurt, but now carried something gentler. Inside the cabin, he passed through rows of seats, economy, business, first, and paused at the front. Seat 1A waited empty. A new attendant, young and nervous, smiled at him. "You're welcome to sit anywhere," she said. He nodded, but didn't sit. Instead, he ran his fingers along the cool edge of the plaque, tracing each letter of his mother's name. For a heartbeat, it felt like she was there, standing just behind him, her voice steady in his ear. Every seat deserves the same care. He took a breath, let it out slowly. and whispered, "I know." Then he turned back toward his row, not 1A, not special, just his, and sat down. The plane doors closed. The engines built to a low, familiar roar. Through the window, he watched sunlight spill over the wing, catching the faint outline of the words painted there, the Grace seats, and smiled. For the first time since that flight, the sky felt exactly how his mother described it, fair, endless, and kind. The email arrived on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning that doesn't try to be anything except itself. Elias was at the kitchen table, spoon in his cereal, sunlight spilling across a pile of envelopes he hadn't opened because none of them could possibly change how the sky felt. His phone buzzed once. Subject: From the office of the CEO, thank you. He just looked at it for a few seconds, as if staring might turn it into something smaller. Hannah, who'd dropped by with a bag of clementines and a "you need fiber" lecture, set the fruit down and nodded toward the screen. "Go on," she said. "Let it talk." Elias opened the message. From Martin Hale, Airy on Air, to Elias Reed. Subject: For your mother, and for you. Elias, I can't replace the years you lost or the seat you were denied. I can't change a sentence that hurt the moment it left someone's mouth. What I can do is keep a promise. Bay. As of this morning, all first-class seats across our fleet carry the Grace Seats plaque. More than a nameplate, it's a standard. Our crews have completed the first round of Dignity in Action training. We have already removed 3 discretionary practices that invited bias, and we've rewritten the escalation policy so that feel can't outrank fact. You said something at the hearing that we've printed on the first page of every manual. Dignity is not an upgrade. It's a promise. We're keeping it. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, not for a photo, not for a headline, just to listen. With respect, Martin Elias read it twice. The second time, slower. The words didn't try to sound perfect. They tried to sound true. He handed the phone to Hannah. She read quietly, then exhaled like someone setting down a heavy box. "That's not PR," she said. "That's a person." Elias didn't answer right away. He slid his cereal bowl aside and pulled his notebook closer, the one that had gathered his days into something that made sense. On the first page, Seat 1A, Grace Reed. Rules are rules. He rested his palm, as if to steady the past before writing into it. "What if I write back?" he asked. Hannah smiled. "Then you'll be doing what you've done the whole time." He opened a new document. His fingers hovered, then settled. From Elias Reed, to Martin Hale. Subject: For your mother, and for you, Mr. Hale. Thank you for the letter. My mom believed dignity is a muscle. You have to use it, or it forgets what it's for. I'm glad your people are using it. I don't need a meeting unless it helps the next kid who sits where I sat. If you want to listen, listen to the quiet moments on your flights, the ones without cameras. That's where it starts. One request: don't make my mom a statue. Make her a standard. Keep teaching crews to see people before policies. Keep the Reed Charter bolder than the fine print. If you do that, you've already met with me. Respectfully, Elias. He stared at the last line for a beat, then hit send before he could ruin it by overthinking. The message left with a soft whoosh, and a weight he didn't know he was still carrying shifted in his chest. Hannah peeled a clementine and placed a section on his notebook like a seal. "That'll do," she said. He laughed. "You and your citrus diplomacy." "Fiber and justice," she said. "Keeps the world moving." For the rest of the morning, small pieces of proof kept arriving, not as headlines, but as ordinary things finally behaving like they should. A push notification from the airline app. Reed Charter Update. Phase 2. Appearance-based enforcement removed. Clear seat eligibility chart posted publicly. Anonymous crew hotline for bias concerns activated. A text from Lewis. No emojis, just a line. Saw a new crew brief today. It's different, good different. A photo from a former co-worker of Grace Reed. A crew room whiteboard covered in shaky signatures beneath the words, We will not look away. None of it felt like triumph. It felt like maintenance, the good kind. That afternoon, a package arrived addressed to Elias Reed in a handwriting he didn't recognize. Inside, a small flat box and a letter on thick paper with an old logo in the corner. Elias, I flew with your mother twice. She corrected me once, in front of a difficult passenger, and saved me twice. This was hers. She left it in my tote the week before the accident. I kept meaning to return it and never did. I'm sorry it took me 7 years. With love and respect, Marjorie K. Crew 214. Inside the box lay a silver service pin, 2 wings framing a tiny torch. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, Grace, keep the light. Elias pressed his thumb to the metal until his skin warmed it. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. The pin did the crying for him, the way objects sometimes do when your body is busy staying upright. He set it beside the notebook, then took a photo and sent it to Martin with no caption. A minute later, 3 dots appeared, then a reply. We'll add a torch to the new training badge, for the light that keeps promises honest. Elias smiled at the screen. Okay, he whispered. That's something. At sunset, he and Hannah walked to the small park under the final approach path. Planes stitched the sky in slow silver arcs, each one pulling a little line of twilight behind it. He used to watch them and wonder which ones his mother was on. Now he watched and thought about who sat in row 1, touching a plaque without knowing which hands had made it necessary. A little girl in light-up sneakers stood with her dad, counting the planes. That one's going to New York, she announced with the authority of children who trust their guesses. Maybe, her dad said, smiling. Maybe it's just going where people need to go. Elias glanced at Hannah. Do you think this sticks? He asked. After the trend dies? She took her time. Not by itself, she said. Trends are weather. Standards are climate. You keep a climate by tending it. He nodded, pocketed the pin, and looked up as another jet passed low enough to ruffle his hair. He thought of his mother in the aisle, tucking blankets, making eye contact with the nervous, the rushed, the invisible. He thought of the seat with her name on it, and the hundreds of other seats with no names at all that deserved the same care. His phone buzzed one more time, a final email for the day. From Dignity in Action Program. Subject, Training Module Feedback Request. We're piloting the new workshop next week with frontline crews. Would you consider watching the first 15 minutes and telling us if the language feels human? No cameras, no PR, just help. Elias laughed softly. They want my opinion on tone? Hannah shrugged. Who better? He typed a short reply. Sure. If it helps someone feel seen 5 feet sooner than I did, I'm in. And hit send. The sky dimmed to that steady blue that feels like a held breath. A plane thumped the air above them. Somewhere, on that plane, someone would need a blanket, a glass of water, a second try, a kinder rule. Somewhere, someone would offer it. He slipped the silver pin back into its box and slid the box into his hoodie pocket. The weight was small and right. Ready? Hannah asked. Yeah, he said. Let's go home. They walked toward the streetlights, the sound of engines fading into something almost like quiet. The world wasn't fixed, but it was adjusting, and for the first evening in a long time, that felt like enough. Morning came early over the Potomac, the sky the same pale blue his mother used to call flight color. Elias stood on the observation deck outside Terminal C, a carry-on beside him, watching a plane rise into the clean light. He wasn't traveling anywhere in particular. Not yet. He'd come just to see what it felt like to stand here without flinching. Below, the white fuselage glinted gold in the sunrise. Ariane Air Flight 416, same route number, new chapter. Its tail carried a small torch emblem beside the words, The Grace Fleet. The sight made his chest tighten and loosen all at once. He thought about how people called it the incident, as if that one day could hold everything that followed. The hearings, the letters, the policies, the faces he'd never forget. But for him, it had never been just an incident. It was a continuation of his mother's work. Unfinished service finally completed by strangers who learned to care. Inside the terminal cafe, the TV played a muted news segment. A scrolling banner read, "Airlines Dignity Charter marks 1 month. Industry-wide standards emerge." Elias smiled faintly into his coffee. Somewhere, buried beneath all the press releases and metrics, the system had learned a human language again. He pulled out his notebook, edges worn, corners soft, and flipped to the last blank page. There was one entry left to write. Mom. They changed the seats. They changed the rules. Maybe not the world, but something close enough to matter. They listen now. Not just to me, to everyone who looks like they don't belong until they do. Your name's flying again. It's everywhere. But what I'm proudest of? It's not the plaques. It's that they finally see people the way you did. Thank you for teaching me that quiet doesn't mean weak. It means steady. Love, Eli. He set the pen down, folded the page, and slipped it into the back pocket of the notebook. Through the glass, the next departing plane taxied into view. Families lined up near Gate 47. Business travelers, young parents, an elderly couple helping each other with carry-ons. He spotted a flight attendant standing at the jet bridge, welcoming passengers with a calm smile. New uniform, same colors. Her wing's pin gleamed in the morning light. A small torch now etched above the airline logo. Elias caught her voice as she greeted a nervous little boy boarding alone. "Don't worry, sweetheart. You're safe. I'll keep an eye on you." Something in the tone, the quiet confidence, made him blink hard. For a split second, he could almost hear his mother saying it. He turned toward Hannah, who had joined him with 2 steaming cups. "It's happening," he said softly. She followed his gaze, then nodded. Justice doesn't always sound like a gavel. Sometimes it just sounds like kindness becoming normal. He smiled. That's what she wanted, I think, for the sky to be fair again. "Looks like it is," Hannah said. Later that afternoon, Elias boarded his own flight, the first since that day. He hadn't told anyone where he was going, maybe just up, maybe just forward. When he reached the door, the new lead attendant scanned his pass and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reed," she said quietly, like a secret she'd been waiting to tell. Her nameplate read Marjorie K. He froze for a beat. The same name from the letter and the pin. She noticed. "You got it then," she said softly, eyes kind. "Your mother's light." He nodded, unable to form words. Marjorie's hand rested on the doorway. "Every flight I start, I touch that torch, just so you know." He managed. "Thank you." "Thank her," she said. "We just follow her lead." He walked through the cabin, past rows of faces. Different colors, languages, lives. All equal at 34,000 feet. When he reached seat 1A, he stopped. The plaque gleamed beneath the armrest. For Grace Reed, who served with dignity. He brushed his fingers across it, just once, then kept walking. He didn't sit there. He didn't need to anymore. His seat was row 15 window. Midway between the front and the back, the view, somehow, perfect. As the engines roared and the plane began its climb, he pressed his forehead to the glass. Clouds opened like curtains, and light spilled in. He imagined his mother somewhere beyond them, not watching over, not haunting, just present. In the hum, in the warmth, in the quiet that no longer hurt. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, he opened his notebook one last time and wrote 3 words at the bottom of the page. "The sky listens." He underlined it once, smiled, and closed the book. Hours later, the aircraft descended through soft dusk. Cities sparkled below like scattered constellations. As the plane leveled, the captain's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome home. From all of us on behalf of Ariane Air, thank you for flying with dignity." A few passengers smiled, not realizing those words had been rewritten by a 16-year-old with a notebook. Elias leaned back in his seat, the torch pin warm in his pocket. Outside, the world kept moving, people boarding, people landing, the endless rhythm of departures and returns. But for him, it wasn't about leaving or arriving anymore. It was about what stayed, the belief that systems could learn, that silence could lead to change, that dignity, once remembered, never truly lands. The wheels kissed the runway, smooth and sure. The sky above turned gold for one last moment before fading to blue. And somewhere, in the quiet between landing and applause, Elias whispered the words that closed the circle. "Welcome home, Mom."